I realized my marriage was falling apart the same week my company trusted me with the biggest project of my career. At the time, I thought stress was the reason I kept forgetting small things. Wrong files attached to emails. Deadlines I normally would have memorized automatically. Tiny calculation errors that never would have happened before. I blamed exhaustion. But exhaustion wasn't the problem. Betrayal was. My name is Annie Collins. I'm 38 years old, Senior Financial Operations Manager at Heartbreak Consulting Group. And for almost 12 years I built a reputation as the woman who never made mistakes. That sounds arrogant. It isn't. In finance, reputation becomes currency. People trusted me because I checked everything twice. Because I noticed inconsistencies others missed. Because I treated numbers the way surgeons treat arteries, carefully, knowing one small error could destroy something important. At Heartbreak, people joked that if Annie approved a report, you could present it directly to God himself. And honestly, I liked that reputation. I worked hard for it. Then Daniel ruined everything in under 4 minutes. It happened on a Wednesday night while I was finalizing quarterly projections from our dining room table. The apartment was quiet except for rain tapping softly against the windows, and the low hum of my laptop fan overheating beside 3 open spreadsheets. Daniel was in the shower when his phone lit up beside me. Normally I wouldn't look. I never looked. That's probably why he got comfortable. But the message preview appeared before I could stop myself. Miss you already. Emma keeps asking when she'll see you again. Red heart ***. My entire body went cold instantly. Emma. Not a coworker. Not business. And definitely not something a client sends at 10:48 p.m. with a heart emoji. I stared at the screen while another message appeared. Thank you again for this weekend. She was so happy. Weekend. Happy. The pieces assembled themselves horrifyingly fast. My hand started shaking before I even unlocked the phone. Part of me still expected some bizarre explanation. Instead I found photographs. Dozens. Daniel at a park with a little girl sitting on his shoulders. Daniel helping her ride a bicycle. Daniel standing beside a blonde woman outside a beach house. Family photos. Actual family photos. I remember hearing the shower turn off down the hallway, while I sat frozen staring at evidence that my husband apparently lived another life on weekends. Not an affair. Not random cheating. A whole second existence. The bathroom door opened. Daniel walked into the living room drying his hair with a towel. Then he saw the phone in my hand, and immediately stopped breathing. That was the moment I knew everything was true. No confusion. No what's wrong. Just instant panic. How long? I asked quietly. Daniel didn't answer. He looked pale suddenly. Older somehow. I can explain. People always say that first. As if explanations matter after deception reaches a certain size. How long? Annie. How long? His shoulders dropped slightly. Almost 6 years. 6 years. I actually laughed once. Not because anything was funny. Because my brain genuinely couldn't process how a human being maintains lies for 6 straight years while still coming home every night asking what you want for dinner. You have a child? I whispered. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. She's 7. 7. Meaning while I was working 60-hour weeks trying to help us buy our apartment, he was becoming someone else's father. I should say the confrontation became explosive after that. It didn't. That's the strange thing about real betrayal. Sometimes it arrives so heavily your emotions shut down completely. Daniel kept talking, trying to explain, trying to justify. Apparently he met Claire during a consulting project years earlier. Apparently, it wasn't supposed to become serious. Apparently he never wanted to hurt me. Classic liar vocabulary. I barely heard him, because all I could think about was work. Not marriage. Not divorce. Work. Specifically the Mercer infrastructure project sitting open on my laptop beside us. A $48 million expansion analysis Heartbreak had spent 8 months trying to secure. My project. My responsibility. Final review deadline Friday morning. And suddenly my brain felt like shattered glass. I barely slept that night. Or the next one. By Friday morning I'd consumed enough coffee to medically concern a cardiologist, and still couldn't focus for more than 10 consecutive minutes. But I convinced myself I was functioning normally. That illusion lasted until my assistant knocked softly on my office door around noon. Annie. I looked up from my monitor. Liam stood there holding printed spreadsheets with the cautious expression people use around unstable explosives. Liam Patel. 26 years old. Junior analyst. Brilliant with data modeling and painfully polite. What's up? I asked. He stepped inside slowly. I think there's a discrepancy in Section 4. My stomach tightened immediately. What kind of discrepancy? He placed the papers carefully on my desk. The labor cost escalation percentages. I scanned the page once, then twice, and felt cold embarrassment flood through me instantly. The numbers were wrong. Not dramatically wrong, but wrong enough that if the report reached the client unchanged, the entire financial forecast would collapse under scrutiny. And worse? The mistake was basic. A formula reference error. The kind interns make during their first month. Not me. Never me. Liam noticed my silence immediately. I already corrected it, he said gently. I just wanted to double-check before final submission. He was trying to protect my pride. That somehow made it worse. I forced myself to breathe normally. Good catch. It happens. No, it didn't. Not to me. That was the problem. After Liam left, I locked my office door and stared at the corrected spreadsheet for almost 20 minutes. Because deep down I understood something terrifying. This wasn't stress anymore. I was slipping. And in my industry, once people stop trusting your precision, your reputation dies quietly and very fast. I told myself the mistake was isolated. One bad week. One emotional distraction. Nothing more. Then Monday happened. The executive review meeting started at 9 a.m. sharp. Conference room B. Full leadership team. Project directors. Finance executives. And my boss, Rebecca Lawson. Rebecca had worked in corporate finance long enough to develop the terrifying ability to detect weakness before employees admitted it themselves. She was sharp, composed, and emotionally unreadable during meetings, which made what happened next even worse. Halfway through presenting my revised projections, Rebecca interrupted calmly. Annie. That one word immediately changed the room atmosphere. I stopped speaking. Rebecca looked down at the printed report, then back at me. Can you explain the acquisition multiplier assumptions on page 19? My stomach dropped, because suddenly I knew. Another mistake. I flipped pages quickly, then found it. Jesus Christ. I duplicated an outdated projection table from an earlier draft, meaning the projected returns were inflated by almost 12%. The room went completely silent. Not hostile. Just shocked, because everyone there knew my work. And everyone there understood this was unlike me. Rebecca closed the report slowly. Meeting adjourned, she said calmly. No anger, which somehow felt worse. People gathered their laptops quietly while avoiding eye contact. Liam looked genuinely worried for me. I couldn't even blame him. By the time the room emptied, only Rebecca and I remained. She sat across from me silently for several seconds. Then finally asked softly, Annie, what's happening to you? For a few seconds I genuinely considered lying, saying I was tired, overworked, burned out, something corporate and manageable. But the problem with holding yourself together for too long is this. Eventually even small kindness feels unbearable. And Rebecca's voice wasn't angry. It was concerned. That almost broke me more than criticism would have. I looked down at the report spread across the conference table between us. 2 major errors in less than a week. If anyone else on the team made mistakes like this, I would have noticed immediately. So would Rebecca. She folded her hands calmly. These aren't normal oversights for you. I nodded once. No. Has something happened? Such a simple question. And somehow after 6 straight days of pretending my life wasn't collapsing, I suddenly couldn't do it anymore. I laughed quietly. One exhausted little sound. Then before I could stop myself, tears started falling. Actual tears. Right there in conference room B beside a 50-page financial projection model. Rebecca's expression changed instantly. Not uncomfortable. Not judgmental. Just human. Oh, Annie. I covered my face with one hand immediately mortified. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. But I did anyway. Twice. because crying at work felt humiliating somehow, especially for someone like me. Competence becomes part of your identity after enough years. And I'd spent over a decade becoming Annie Collins, the reliable one, the precise one, the woman executives trusted with impossible projects because she never cracked under pressure. Now I was sitting in a glass conference room crying over spreadsheets. Rebecca waited quietly until I could breathe normally again. Then she asked softly, "Do you want to tell me what's going on?" And for some reason, I did. Not every detail. Not immediately. But enough. The affair. The second family. The child. The 6 years of lies. Rebecca stayed completely silent while I talked. No interruptions. No fake sympathy. Just listening. When I finally finished, the room felt strangely lighter. Like I'd been carrying concrete inside my chest for days without realizing how heavy it was. Rebecca leaned back slowly in her chair. Then sighed once. That explains the concentration issues. I laughed weakly. At least now there's a professional explanation for my public self-destruction. This isn't self-destruction. It feels like it. Rebecca studied me carefully for a moment, then said something unexpected. My ex-husband cheated on me too. I looked up immediately, honestly shocked. Rebecca Lawson terrified junior executives for sport. She carried herself like someone emotionally assembled from steel and deadlines. You. A tiny smile appeared on her face. Yes, Annie. Even terrifying finance directors get divorced sometimes. That actually made me laugh. First genuine laugh all week. Rebecca crossed one leg over the other calmly. He had another relationship for almost 2 years before I found out. Not the same scale as Daniel's deception, but enough to understand the emotional damage. The worst part, she continued, was how long I blamed myself afterward. That hit harder than expected. Because underneath all my anger was another feeling I hadn't admitted out loud yet. Failure. Not rationally. Emotionally. I kept replaying the last 6 years searching for moments I should have noticed. Signs I ignored. Questions I never asked. Rebecca seemed to read that directly off my face. Stop doing that. I frowned slightly. Doing what? Treating his deception like evidence of your inadequacy. Silence. Then quietly. I keep wondering what was wrong with me. Nothing. Fast answer. Certain. He lied because lying benefited him, Annie. Not because you lack something. I looked down at the table and suddenly realized how badly I needed someone to say that. Rebecca opened one of the desk drawers beside her and pulled out a small business card. She slid it across the table toward me. Call her. I glanced down. Margaret Ellis, family law specialist. She handled my divorce, Rebecca said calmly. Brilliant attorney. More importantly, she doesn't let emotional manipulation survive in court. I stared at the card quietly, then looked back at Rebecca. Why are you helping me? That question slipped out before I could stop it. Rebecca's expression softened slightly. Because 10 years ago someone helped me. Simple answer. No corporate language. No motivational speech. Just honesty. She closed the project folder carefully. Here's what's going to happen next. Her professional voice returned slightly. You're taking the rest of the week off. I can't. Yes, you can. The Mercer deadline. We'll survive 5 days. I shook my head immediately. Rebecca, this project is too important. And so are you. That sentence nearly made me cry again, which was deeply inconvenient. Rebecca continued calmly. You've carried this company through worse situations than a delayed report revision. Technically true. Still, walking away felt impossible. Because work was the only stable thing left in my life. Rebecca seemed to understand that too. I'm not removing you from the project. That got my attention immediately. You're not. No. She leaned forward slightly. But right now your brain is operating in survival mode. You need sleep, legal advice, and at least 48 hours without pretending you're fine. Honestly, she was right. I just hated hearing it. Before leaving the conference room, Rebecca paused near the door, then looked back at me. One more thing. Yeah. What happened to your marriage has nothing to do with your intelligence. I stared at her quietly. because somehow that was the exact sentence I needed most. The next few weeks felt strange. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just emotionally exhausting. I met with Margaret Ellis 3 days later. Rebecca wasn't exaggerating. Margaret approached divorce law the way military generals approach invasion strategy. Prepared, precise, emotionally impossible to intimidate. After listening to my situation for almost an hour, she removed her glasses calmly and said, "Your husband maintained a second household while legally married to you for 6 years?" "Yes." Margaret blinked once. "Well, that's ambitious." I laughed so hard I almost scared myself, because after weeks of grief and humiliation, dry humor suddenly felt medicinal. Margaret became the first person who treated the situation like a solvable problem instead of emotional tragedy. Separate finances? Document them. Apartment ownership? Review paperwork. Retirement accounts? Protect immediately. Step by step, my panic slowly transformed into structure. And somewhere during that process, I finally stopped blaming myself. That part took longer. But it happened. Slowly I realized Daniel's betrayal wasn't proof I'd failed as a wife. It was proof he lacked the courage to tell the truth before creating an entirely second life. That distinction changed everything. By the second month I could finally focus again. Not perfectly, but enough. I returned to the Mercer project with almost frightening intensity. If heartbreak destroys some people, apparently it turns others into machines. I rebuilt every projection model personally. Reviewed every financial assumption twice, sometimes 3 times. Liam noticed first. One evening around 7 p.m. he stopped beside my desk while I was reviewing infrastructure acquisition forecasts. "You're back," he said carefully. I looked up from my monitor. "What?" "The old Annie." I smiled faintly, hopefully with fewer emotional breakdowns in conference rooms. Liam looked horrified immediately. "I would never." "I'm joking." That relaxed him slightly. Then he hesitated. "For what it's worth, everyone was worried about you." That surprised me honestly. Corporate environments rarely advertise empathy loudly, but apparently people notice more than you think. Especially when someone known for precision suddenly starts slipping. Over the next several weeks, the project evolved from important to massive. Mercer Infrastructure expanded negotiations unexpectedly, nearly doubling projected investment scale. The revised acquisition strategy one designed ended up restructuring the entire financial rollout model. Long nights returned, but this time differently. Not frantic, focused. For the first time in months, my brain felt clear again. No obsessive replaying of lies. No wondering where Daniel spent weekends. No self-blame. Just work. Numbers. Solutions. Momentum. And honestly, felt incredible. By October, the Mercer project had become the single largest account Harbridge Consulting had handled in almost 7 years, which meant pressure increased dramatically. Board meetings, investor reviews, late-night revision calls with legal teams in 3 different time zones. Normally that kind of workload would have destroyed me emotionally. Instead it saved me. Because for the first time since discovering Daniel's second life, my thoughts finally belonged to something other than betrayal. Not entirely, of course. Pain doesn't disappear neatly. Sometimes it returned unexpectedly, like seeing fathers walking children to school in the morning, or hearing someone mention anniversaries casually at work. But the grief no longer controlled every hour of my day. And strangely enough, I started noticing something important. I was functioning better without Daniel than I had during the final years of our marriage. That realization terrified me at first, then relieved me. One Thursday evening, Rebecca stopped by my office around 8 p.m. carrying 2 coffees. "You're still here." "So are you." "Unfortunately." She handed me a cup before sitting across from my desk. The city skyline glowed through the windows behind her while spreadsheets covered almost every surface around me. Very glamorous corporate lifestyle. Rebecca glanced toward my monitor. "Liam says you rebuilt the entire acquisition structure from scratch." I didn't trust the previous model anymore. "Why?" I shrugged slightly. "Too many weak assumptions." Rebecca looked at me carefully over her coffee cup. Interesting choice of words. I realized what she meant immediately. Weak assumptions. Trust. Collapse. Apparently my personal life had started leaking into my professional vocabulary. Maybe I'm projecting, I admitted. Rebecca smiled faintly. Maybe you're learning. That sentence stayed with me longer than expected. Because heartbreak does teach you things. Terrible things sometimes. Useful things too. Like how quickly stability can become illusion. Like how dangerous it is to ignore inconsistencies simply because acknowledging them feels painful. And perhaps most importantly, how much energy maintaining denial actually consumes. Around mid-October, Daniel called unexpectedly while I was leaving the office. I almost ignored it. Almost. But eventually curiosity won. Hello. Hey. His voice sounded unfamiliar now. Not because it changed. Because my perception had. What do you need? Straight to the point. No energy left for polite performance. Daniel exhaled quietly. I wanted to check on you. Interesting. After 6 years of deception, apparently he developed concern. I'm fine. You sound tired. I'm working. Silence. Then carefully. Rebecca Lawson? That caught my attention immediately. How do you know Rebecca? We met once years ago at a company event. Of course. Daniel always remembered useful professional connections. She's helping you? I leaned against the parking garage wall beside my car. She's my boss. You know what I mean. Unfortunately, I did. And suddenly I understood something deeply irritating. Daniel assumed emotional vulnerability automatically required male replacement. Because that's how he approached relationships himself. Transactional comfort. Emotional overlap. No, I said coldly. She's helping me survive consequences you created. Long silence after that. Then finally, I deserve that. At least he knew. Honestly, our conversations after separation became strangely calm. Not friendly. Just drained. Like all the emotional violence already happened silently months earlier. Fighting requires energy. And eventually betrayal consumes all of it. How's Emma? I asked before thinking. Daniel sounded surprised. She's okay. Good. Another silence. Then softly. She asks about you sometimes. That hit harder than expected. Because despite everything, I missed her. Not in some maternal fantasy way. Just honestly. Emma became collateral damage inside adult selfishness. And none of it was her fault. She shouldn't, I said quietly. She liked you. I closed my eyes briefly. Dangerous topic. So I redirected immediately. When do you move your things out completely? Practical. Safe. Daniel understood the shift. Next weekend. Okay. Then after a pause. I really am sorry, Annie. There it was again. The apology. Months later. Still useless. Because apologies don't rebuild trust once someone destroys reality itself. I know, I answered calmly. And surprisingly, I meant it. I genuinely believed he regretted hurting me. That didn't change anything. But hatred had started fading into something colder and less exhausting. Acceptance, maybe. After the call ended, I sat inside my car for several minutes staring at the steering wheel. Then suddenly realized something strange. I didn't want him back. Not even a little. That was new. And freeing. The Mercer presentation happened 3 weeks later. Final executive review before contract approval. Months of work compressed into one meeting. Every projection. Every acquisition timeline. Every infrastructure risk analysis. Mine. I arrived at headquarters before sunrise carrying enough printed reports to qualify as structural engineering. Liam met me near the elevators holding his laptop and looking stressed enough to medically concern somebody. You okay? I asked. No. Good. Means you're taking this seriously. That actually made him laugh nervously. Inside conference room A. Executives from Mercer Infrastructure were already setting up. Expensive suits. Perfect hair. The kind of people capable of approving or destroying careers before lunch. Rebecca entered last. Calm as always. She glanced at me once. You ready? And for the first time in months, I actually was. The presentation lasted nearly 2 hours. Questions came aggressively. Financial exposure. Expansion timing. Market volatility assumptions. Normally I enjoyed meetings like this intellectually. Today felt different. Sharper somehow. Every answer landed confidently. Every projection held under scrutiny. Halfway through the presentation, one Mercer executive interrupted while reviewing projected acquisition growth. "Who built this restructuring model?" I looked up. "I did." The executive leaned back slowly. "This is excellent work." Simple sentence. But after months of emotional collapse, it landed almost painfully hard. Because suddenly I remembered who I used to be before betrayal consumed my concentration. Competent, focused, good at my job. By the end of the meeting, Mercer approved the revised strategy unanimously. Not just approved, expanded. An additional $70 million operational rollout added during final negotiations. When the clients finally left, the room remained silent for several seconds. Then Rebecca closed her folder slowly. "Well," she said calmly, "that should significantly improve quarterly revenue." Liam actually laughed from pure relief. I sat back in my chair feeling something unfamiliar rise slowly inside my chest. Pride. Not survival. Not recovery. Pride. Because despite everything, I'd rebuilt myself while carrying emotional devastation most people around me never even fully saw. Rebecca looked at me carefully, then smiled slightly. "I think congratulations are appropriate." And for the first time in almost a year, I believed her. The Mercer deal officially closed 6 weeks later. Total value, $112 million. Even saying the number out loud felt surreal. Heartbreak Consulting had never expected the project to grow that large when negotiations first started. Originally, it was supposed to be a straightforward infrastructure modernization analysis. Instead, the acquisition model I rebuilt expanded into a multi-phase national rollout strategy involving 3 additional investment groups and long-term operational restructuring. Corporate language aside, the project made the company an absurd amount of money, and suddenly everyone at Heartbreak knew my name again for the right reasons. Not because I cried in a conference room, not because my performance slipped temporarily, but because I helped secure the most profitable contract the firm had seen in years. Funny how quickly corporate reputation recovers once numbers become impressive enough. The Monday after final approval, Rebecca called me into her office. This time I wasn't terrified walking there. Just tired. The good kind of tired. The earned kind. Rebecca stood near the window overlooking downtown traffic when I entered. "Close the door." Always dramatic. I obeyed. Then immediately noticed 2 glasses sitting on her desk beside an unopened bottle of champagne. I raised an eyebrow. At 10:30 in the morning? Rebecca sat down calmly. "Today we celebrate capitalism." "Fair enough." She poured both glasses before sliding one toward me. "To the Mercer Project." I laughed softly and lifted my glass. "To surviving the Mercer Project." "No," Rebecca corrected. "To leading it." That distinction mattered more than she probably realized. For months I'd felt like someone barely surviving her own life. Now suddenly people were reminding me I'd actually accomplished something extraordinary during the worst period of my adulthood. Rebecca took a sip before opening a folder sitting beside her laptop. Then she pushed it toward me. "Promotion paperwork." I stared at the title for several seconds. Director of Strategic Financial Operations. My stomach tightened instantly. Not from fear. Shock. "Rebecca, you earned it." I looked back down at the documents. Salary increase. Executive bonus structure. Expanded leadership authority. Everything real. Everything serious. "You know," Rebecca said casually, "most people would have collapsed completely after what happened to you." I smiled faintly. "I almost did. But you didn't." "No, I didn't." And suddenly I realized something important. For months I'd been measuring myself only through pain. Not progress. Not resilience. Pain. Like survival somehow counted less because it wasn't graceful. Rebecca leaned back in her chair carefully studying me. "Do you know why I kept you on the project after those mistakes?" I frowned slightly. "Because you felt bad for me?" Rebecca looked offended immediately. "Absolutely not." That actually made me laugh. "You stayed because one bad month doesn't erase 10 years of excellence." Simple sentence. But honestly, that sentence healed something inside me. Because betrayal had damaged more than my marriage. It damaged my confidence. Quietly. Deeply. For weeks I genuinely believed emotional pain had permanently changed me into someone unreliable, weak, distracted, less capable. But Rebecca saw something I couldn't yet see myself. I was struggling, not broken. There's a difference. I signed the promotion papers that afternoon. Liam found out approximately 14 minutes later, because corporate offices function exactly like high schools with better coffee. He appeared at my office door pretending professionalism while visibly excited. "So, Director Collins now?" I looked up from my laptop. "Apparently. That's terrifying." "It should be." He grinned before holding up a printed document dramatically. "I already updated the reporting structure." "Of course you did." Liam hesitated near the doorway. Then his expression softened slightly. "For what it's worth, I'm really glad you're okay." That caught me off guard more than expected, because people at work rarely talk directly about emotional survival, especially in corporate finance where everyone pretends stress is personality decoration. "I'm getting there," I admitted honestly, and I meant it. Not fully healed, not magically transformed, just better. The divorce finalized quietly 2 months later. No dramatic courtroom scenes. No screaming. Mostly paperwork and emotional exhaustion. Daniel signed everything faster than expected. Maybe guilt motivated cooperation. Maybe he was simply tired too. By then he and Claire, his Claire, not my sister, were trying to repair whatever remained of their relationship after the truth exploded everywhere. Honestly, I stopped asking. That chapter no longer belonged to me. The strange thing about betrayal is eventually it becomes boring. At first it feels world-ending. Then gradually it transforms into background history your brain references less and less often. Like an old scar. Still there. Just no longer bleeding. One snowy evening in December, Rebecca and I stayed late reviewing annual projections while Christmas music played quietly somewhere near reception. Around 9 p.m. she closed her laptop and looked at me thoughtfully. "You seem lighter." I smiled slightly. I think I finally stopped blaming myself. Rebecca nodded once like she understood exactly how difficult that was. "Good." Outside the office windows, snow drifted slowly across downtown streets glowing gold under city lights. Beautiful in that lonely corporate way. "You know," Rebecca said casually, "there's something nobody tells women after betrayal." "What?" "That rebuilding yourself becomes addictive." I looked at her carefully. She continued, "Once you realize your life didn't end, you stop tolerating things that make you unhappy." That stayed with me, because she was right. Before everything collapsed, I'd spent years shrinking quietly inside routines I never questioned. Excusing emotional distance. Ignoring loneliness. Accepting partial attention from someone who should have loved me fully. Now, I noticed things differently. My standards changed. Not just for relationships. For everything. 3 weeks later, Heartbreak hosted its annual executive dinner at a hotel downtown. Open bar. Expensive lighting. Corporate small talk pretending not to be networking. Classic finance industry behavior. I almost didn't attend. Then Rebecca threatened to personally drag me there if necessary. So naturally I went. About halfway through the evening, while executives congratulated themselves over quarterly profits, Mercer's lead investor approached our table holding champagne. He shook my hand firmly. "Your restructuring model made us a fortune. Glad you're happy with the results." He laughed. "Happy? Annie, several competitors are trying to hire people off my team because of your projections." Rebecca smirked beside me like a proud war general. The investor continued. "Frankly, Harbridge is lucky you stayed." That sentence landed harder than he probably intended. Because 6 months earlier, I almost lost everything important to me emotionally. And yet somehow, professionally, I became stronger. Not because suffering magically improves people. That's nonsense. But because eventually I stopped pouring energy into saving someone else's lies, and finally invested it back into myself. Later that night I stood alone near the ballroom balcony overlooking the city. Cold air. Music behind me. Traffic below. My phone buzzed softly. Message from Claire. "Mom says you sounded happier today." I smiled reading it, then typed back. "I think I finally am. And for the first time in a very long time." That wasn't something I had to force myself to believe.